The last words my mother said to me before her helicopter went down were the same words she'd been saying my entire life. "You're nothing but a burden, Sarah. I don't know why I even bother with you." She said it right there, in front of the entire military base command, in front of my fellow soldiers, in front of the journalists who had come to cover her promotion ceremony. General Patricia Montgomery, the first woman to lead the 82nd Airborne Division, couldn't even pretend to be proud of her daughter for 5 minutes. I stood there in my standard issue uniform, watching her accept another medal, another accolade, another moment of glory that reminded everyone present that I would never measure up, not to her standards, not to anyone's standards. But 3 hours later, when that helicopter carrying my mother and 6 other high-ranking officials disappeared into the Appalachian Mountains during a routine transport mission, those same people who had watched her humiliate me would learn something they never expected. They would learn who I really was. Let me take you back to the beginning. To understand what happened that day, you need to understand what my life had been like up until that moment. My name is Captain Sarah Montgomery, though most people just knew me as the General's disappointing daughter. For 28 years, I had lived in the shadow of a woman who seemed incapable of seeing any value in me whatsoever. My mother was a legend in the military. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, led countless successful operations, and broken more glass ceilings than anyone could count. Patricia Montgomery was the kind of soldier they write books about, the kind of leader who inspires movies. And then there was me. I had joined the Army straight out of high school, partly because I thought it might finally make her proud, and partly because I honestly didn't know what else to do with my life. I was decent at my job, good, even, but next to her accomplishments, everything I did seemed small and insignificant. I specialized in search and rescue operations, while she was commanding entire divisions and making strategic decisions that affected thousands of lives. I was rappelling down cliffs to find lost hikers and coordinating rescue efforts for small-scale emergencies. Important work, sure, but not the kind of thing that makes headlines. My mother never missed an opportunity to remind me of this difference. "Search and rescue," she would say with that particular tone of disappointment that had become her trademark when talking about me. Playing in the woods while real soldiers do real work. The promotion ceremony that day had been particularly brutal. She was being honored for her exceptional leadership during a recent joint operation with NATO forces. The ceremony was held at Fort Bragg, with full military honors, media coverage, and an audience that included some of the most important figures in the armed forces. I had been required to attend, of course. As her only child, my presence was expected, even if my existence was barely acknowledged. I remember standing in formation with the other soldiers, watching her accept her commendation with that perfect military bearing she was famous for. She looked magnificent up there, confident, powerful, every inch the decorated general she had worked so hard to become. When the formal ceremony ended, there was a reception. Military brass, politicians, journalists, all congratulating her on another well-deserved honor. I tried to blend into the background, hoping to avoid the inevitable moment when someone would ask about me, and she would have to pretend I was something other than a disappointment. But that moment came anyway. A reporter from Military Times approached us as we stood near the refreshment table. "General Montgomery," he said with that practiced smile journalists use when they're fishing for a human interest angle, "I'd love to hear about your family. This is your daughter, isn't it? She must be incredibly proud to follow in your footsteps." My mother's smile never wavered, but I saw something cold flash in her eyes. "This is Sarah," she said, as if my name itself was somehow distasteful. "She's in search and rescue." The way she said it made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. The reporter, picking up on the subtle tension but not understanding it, pressed on. "Search and rescue. That must be incredibly challenging work. You must have some amazing stories." I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother cut me off. "Sarah has always preferred smaller challenges," she said. "She's never been one for the kind of responsibility that real leadership requires." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face burn with embarrassment as several other officers nearby turned to look at us. Some of them knew me, knew my work, but in that moment, all they heard was a general publicly dismissing her own daughter. "I see," the reporter said, clearly uncomfortable now. "Well, I'm sure you're both very proud of your service to our country. Some of us serve in more significant ways than others," my mother replied. taking a sip of her wine. Sarah does her best, but she's always been more of a burden than an asset. I've learned not to expect too much. The conversation around us seemed to pause. I felt like everyone in the room was staring at me, watching this public humiliation unfold. My fellow soldiers, my superiors, the media, all witnesses to my mother's complete dismissal of everything I had worked for. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell that reporter about the 17 lives I had saved in the past 2 years alone, about the commendations I had received for my work, about the specialized training I had completed that qualified me for operations most soldiers could never handle. But I didn't say any of those things. I just stood there, feeling smaller and more worthless than I had ever felt in my life. "If you'll excuse me," I finally managed to say, "I should get back to my duties." My mother didn't even acknowledge that I had spoken. She had already turned back to the reporter, dismissing me as completely as if I had never been there at all. I walked away from that reception feeling like I wanted to disappear entirely. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a burden. Maybe everything I thought I had accomplished was just me playing in the woods while real soldiers did real work. I was still wrestling with those thoughts 3 hours later when the emergency alarm began to sound. The alarm cut through the evening air like a knife, sharp and urgent in a way that made every soldier on base snap to immediate attention. I was in my quarters, still in my dress uniform from the ceremony, when the announcement came over the base-wide communication system. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We have a missing aircraft situation. UH-60 Black Hawk with 7 souls on board, including General Patricia Montgomery, has failed to report to scheduled waypoints. Aircraft is presumed down in the Appalachian Mountain region. All available search and rescue personnel report to Operations Command immediately." The words hit me like ice water. My mother's helicopter was missing. I ran to the operations center, my mind racing. 7 people on board, my mother among them. A Black Hawk helicopter, one of the most reliable aircraft in military service, had simply vanished somewhere in the mountains of North Carolina. When I burst into the operations center, it was chaos. Radio operators were frantically trying to make contact with the missing aircraft. Weather specialists were analyzing conditions in the search area. Flight coordinators were scrambling to organize search teams. Colonel Harris, the base operations commander, was standing in the center of it all, trying to coordinate the response. When he saw me, his expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy. "Captain Montgomery," he said. "I'm sorry about—" "Sir?" I interrupted, requesting permission to join the search operation. He shook his head. "Captain, I understand your personal investment in this, but given your relationship to one of the missing persons, I think it would be better if—" "With respect, sir," I said, "I'm the most qualified search and rescue specialist on this base. My personal feelings don't change the fact that I'm the best person you have for this job." Colonel Harris studied my face for a moment. Around us, the controlled chaos of the search operation continued. Radio chatter filled the air as various teams checked in and reported their status. "The weather's turning bad up there," he said finally. "Mountain conditions, low visibility, potential for severe storms. This isn't going to be a simple grid search. I know the terrain, sir. I've run exercises in those mountains dozens of times. I know every trail, every possible landing zone, every place a pilot might try to put down a damaged aircraft." He was quiet for another moment, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Captain. You're leading the ground search team, but I want you to understand, this is a rescue operation, not a recovery mission. We bring everyone home alive. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." What Colonel Harris didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that I had been preparing for this exact scenario my entire career. Not specifically my mother's helicopter going down, of course, but mountain rescue operations in hostile conditions with multiple casualties and limited time. While my mother had been commanding divisions and making strategic decisions, I had been becoming something else entirely. Something she had never bothered to notice or acknowledge. I had completed specialized training in high-altitude rescue operations, wilderness survival, emergency medical response, and disaster coordination. I had studied every mountain range on the East Coast, memorized weather patterns, and trained with the best search and rescue specialists in the country. I wasn't just good at my job, I was exceptional at it. And tonight, all of that training was about to matter more than it ever had before. Within 30 minutes, I had assembled a team of 12 specialists, mountain climbers, medics, communications experts, and survival specialists. We loaded into 2 UH-60 helicopters, the same model as the missing aircraft, and headed into the storm that was building over the Appalachian Mountains. The weather was getting worse by the minute. Wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour, visibility dropping to near zero in some areas, and the temperature falling fast. These were exactly the kind of conditions that could turn a routine transport flight into a life-or-death emergency. As we flew toward the search area, I studied the topographical maps and weather reports, trying to think like a pilot facing an in-flight emergency. Where would they try to land? What routes would they take if they were dealing with mechanical problems or severe weather? "Captain," came the voice of our pilot through my headset. "We're approaching the primary search zone. Where do you want to start?" I looked out at the mountain terrain below us, barely visible through the swirling clouds and precipitation. Somewhere down there, 7 people were waiting for rescue. One of them was my mother. The woman who had spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough was depending on me now, whether she realized it or not. "There," I said, pointing to a ridgeline about 2 miles to the north. "That's where they would have tried to put down. It's the only area with enough clear space for an emergency landing, and it's on the flight path between their last known position and their destination." We set down on a narrow plateau about half a mile from my target area. The wind was howling now, and snow had started to fall, making visibility even worse. My team gathered around me as I laid out the search plan. "Listen up," I shouted over the wind. "We have 7 people out there somewhere, possibly injured, definitely cold, and running out of time. The temperature is dropping fast, and this storm is only going to get worse. We need to find them, stabilize any injuries, and get them to safety before hypothermia becomes a factor." I divided the team into 3 groups, each responsible for searching a different section of the mountainside. We would maintain radio contact, work our way systematically through the terrain, and rendezvous every 30 minutes to share information and coordinate our efforts. "Remember," I told them, "these aren't just statistics. These are people with families, people who are counting on us to bring them home. We don't give up, we don't quit, and we don't leave anyone behind." My team looked at me with the kind of respect I had never seen before. These were experienced soldiers, people who had worked with me on previous operations, but something was different now. Maybe it was the circumstances, or maybe it was something they heard in my voice that told them I wasn't the same person who had been humiliated at the reception just hours earlier. We began our search as the storm intensified around us. For the first hour, we found nothing. Radio contact with the missing helicopter remained non-existent. The terrain was treacherous, made worse by the deteriorating weather conditions. We were rappelling down cliff faces, searching through dense forest, and checking every possible location where an aircraft might have come down. My radio crackled to life. "Team 2 to Captain Montgomery. We've got something." My heart jumped. "What's your status, Team 2? "We found debris, Captain. Scattered over about a 100-yard area. Looks like impact damage from a helicopter rotor. Any sign of the main aircraft?" "Negative, but we're following a debris trail that leads further down the mountain. Continue your search pattern. Team 3, adjust your search area to grid 7 Alpha. Team 1, with me." We moved quickly through the forest, following the path that Team 2 had identified. The debris trail was clear once you knew what to look for. Pieces of metal, fragments of glass, broken tree branches where something large had passed through at high speed. And then we found them. The helicopter had crashed in a small clearing about halfway down the mountain. It was lying on its side, the main rotor destroyed, the cabin partially crushed, but still intact. Smoke was rising from the engine compartment, and I could see movement inside the aircraft. They were alive. "All teams, this is Captain Montgomery. We have located the aircraft. Coordinates follow. I need immediate medical support and evacuation preparation." I approached the wreckage carefully, assessing the situation. The helicopter had hit hard, but the pilots had done an incredible job of controlling the crash. Instead of slamming into the trees at full speed, they had managed to auto-rotate down into the clearing, sacrificing the aircraft to save the lives of everyone on board. "Hello," I called out. "This is Captain Montgomery, U.S. Army Search and Rescue. Can anyone hear me?" A voice responded from inside the wreckage, weak but clear. "Here. We're here. Thank God." I crawled through the twisted metal of the helicopter's doorway. Inside, I found 7 people in various states of injury. 2 of the crew members had obvious fractures. One of the passengers was unconscious with what looked like a head injury. And there, Strapped into her seat, with blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead, was my mother. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not disappointment, not dismissal. Something that might have been relief, or gratitude, or maybe even a hint of respect. "Sarah," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "I'm here, Mom," I said, immediately shifting into emergency medical mode. "I'm going to get you out of here." Over the next 30 minutes, my team performed what could only be described as a miracle of coordination and efficiency. We stabilized the injured, secured the aircraft to prevent further collapse, and prepared everyone for emergency evacuation. My mother had a concussion and several broken ribs, but she was conscious and coherent. As I worked to splint her injuries and prepare her for transport, she kept staring at me with that same expression of disbelief. "How did you find us so fast?" she asked. "This is what I do," I replied, checking her pupils for signs of brain injury. "It's what I've always done. But the storm, the terrain, the other search teams haven't even reached the area yet." I looked at her directly for the first time in years without feeling like I needed to apologize for my existence. "I'm good at my job, Mom. I've always been good at my job. You just never bothered to notice." She was quiet for a moment, wincing as I adjusted the splint on her ribs. "Sarah, we can talk about it later," I said. "Right now, I need to focus on getting you and everyone else off this mountain safely." My radio crackled to life. It was Colonel Harris, calling from base operations. "Captain Montgomery, what's your status?" "All 7 souls accounted for, sir. We have multiple injuries, but everyone is stable, requesting immediate medical evacuation." "Outstanding work, Captain. Evacuation helicopters are en route to your position. ETA 15 minutes. As we waited for the evacuation helicopters, word of our successful rescue began to spread throughout the military communications network. The same people who had witnessed my humiliation at the reception just hours earlier were now hearing a very different story. Captain Sarah Montgomery, the woman her mother had called a burden, had led a search and rescue operation that found 7 missing people in record time during a severe mountain storm. She had navigated treacherous terrain, coordinated multiple teams, and successfully stabilized and extracted all survivors from a helicopter crash site that other search teams hadn't even been able to locate. The evacuation went smoothly. Within an hour, all 7 survivors were on their way to the base hospital, receiving the medical care they needed. My mother's injuries were serious, but not life-threatening, and the doctors expected her to make a full recovery. But something had changed between us during those moments in the wreckage. Something fundamental had shifted in the way she looked at me, spoke to me, treated me. I was completing my after-action report when Colonel Harris called me into his office. "Captain Montgomery," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "I've been getting calls all evening, from Division Command, from the Pentagon, from the Secretary of the Army. Everyone wants to know about the soldier who pulled off what they're calling one of the most impressive search and rescue operations in recent memory." I didn't know how to respond to that. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No, Captain. You were doing a lot more than that." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "I've been reviewing your service record, your training certifications, your performance evaluations, your commendations. Did you know that you have more specialized certifications than any other search and rescue specialist in this command? I hadn't known that, actually. Did you know that your success rate on rescue operations is 97%? That's higher than some entire units achieve." I was starting to feel uncomfortable with the attention. "Sir, I've had good teams to work with." "Captain, stop deflecting. You saved 7 lives tonight, including a general officer, under conditions that would have challenged the most experienced rescue specialists in the military. You did it faster and more efficiently than anyone thought possible, and you did it while dealing with the personal stress of knowing one of the victims was your own mother." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross," he continued. "I'm also recommending you for immediate promotion to Major, and I'm putting you in command of all search and rescue operations for this division." I sat there in stunned silence. This was more recognition than I had ever dreamed of receiving, more than I had ever thought I deserved. "Sir, Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, Captain. You earned this. Every bit of it." As I left his office, I couldn't help but think about the words my mother had spoken just hours earlier. "You're nothing but a burden, Sarah. I don't know why I even bother with you." Those words felt like they belonged to a different lifetime now. I visited my mother in the hospital the next day. She was awake and alert, her injuries healing well. When I walked into her room, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, something that might have been pride. "Sarah," she said, "I owe you an apology." I sat down in the chair next to her bed. "Mom, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." Her voice was firm, the same command tone she used when addressing her troops, but directed at herself now. "I have spent your entire life being blind to who you really are. I was so focused on what I thought success should look like that I couldn't see the success that was right in front of me." She paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily to her. "You saved my life yesterday. Not just my life, 7 lives. You did something that most soldiers could never do, under conditions that would have stopped most people cold, and you did it with a skill and professionalism that would make any commander proud." I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. "I've been trying to make you proud my whole life." "You have made me proud," she said. "I was just too stubborn and too caught up in my own definition of success to admit it. Search and rescue isn't playing in the woods, Sarah. It's some of the most demanding, most important work the military does, and you're not just good at it, you're exceptional." We talked for another hour. For the first time in my adult life, my mother asked me about my work, my training, my goals for the future. She listened when I told her about the lives I had saved, the operations I had led, the specialized skills I had developed, and for the first time in my life, I felt like she was really seeing me. "There's something else," she said as I was getting ready to leave. "The story of your rescue operation is getting attention beyond just our command structure. Military Times wants to do a feature article about you. They're calling it, 'The Soldier Who Saved the General.'" I laughed. "They're going to love the irony of that story." "What irony?" "The general's daughter, the one she called a burden in front of that same reporter just hours before the crash, ends up being the one who saves her life." My mother was quiet for a moment. "I deserve that," she said finally. "But Sarah, I want you to know, you were never a burden. You were a gift that I was too blind to appreciate." The feature article came out 2 weeks later. It told the complete story: the public humiliation at the promotion ceremony, the helicopter crash, the dramatic rescue operation, and the reconciliation between mother and daughter. But more than that, it told the story of a soldier who had spent years developing expertise in a crucial field, while being overlooked and undervalued by the people who should have been supporting her. The response was overwhelming. I received messages from soldiers around the world, many of them sharing their own stories of being underestimated or dismissed by people who should have believed in them. I heard from search and rescue specialists who had felt like their work was undervalued compared to more high-profile military operations. But most importantly, I heard from people who had been told they weren't good enough, weren't important enough, weren't worthy of respect, and who had used those dismissals as motivation to become better than anyone expected them to be. My promotion to major came through a month later, along with my new position as Division Search and Rescue Commander. I was also selected to attend the Command and General Staff College, a career milestone that put me on track for senior leadership positions. My mother, fully recovered from her injuries, was present at my promotion ceremony. When I received my new rank insignia, she was the first person to salute me with my new rank. "Major Montgomery," she said with a smile that held 28 years of regret and newfound pride, "I couldn't be more proud to be your mother." The woman who had once called me a burden was now telling anyone who would listen about her daughter, the decorated search and rescue specialist who had saved 7 lives in a mountain storm. But the most important change wasn't in how she saw me. It was in how I saw myself. Today, 5 years later, I command search and rescue operations for an entire theater of operations. I've been deployed to natural disaster sites around the world, led rescue operations in war zones, and trained the next generation of search and rescue specialists. I've saved more than 200 lives in my career, and I've never lost a single person I was sent to find. But I think the most important rescue I ever performed was the one that happened that night in the hospital, when I rescued my relationship with my mother, and more importantly, rescued my own sense of self-worth. My mother still serves as a general, and we talk regularly now. She's become one of my strongest advocates, and she never misses an opportunity to tell people about the daughter who she's incredibly proud of. Sometimes people ask me how it felt to prove everyone wrong. to show them that the person they had dismissed was actually extraordinary. But that's not really what happened. I didn't become extraordinary overnight. I had always been good at what I did. I had always been skilled, dedicated, and capable of remarkable things. The only thing that changed was that people finally started paying attention. I think about that reporter sometimes, the one who witnessed my mother's cruel dismissal at the promotion ceremony. He was the one who wrote the feature article about my rescue operation. In his article, he included a line that has stuck with me ever since. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to give them the chance to show what they're truly capable of. I wasn't waiting for someone to give me a chance, though. I was preparing for the moment when the chance would come, whether anyone believed in me or not. My mother called me a burden. She said I would never amount to anything significant. She dismissed my work as unimportant, and my potential as limited. But when her helicopter went down in those mountains, when 7 lives hung in the balance, when everything depended on finding them before the storm made rescue impossible, in that moment, the burden became the savior, and everyone who had ever underestimated me learned something they would never forget. Sometimes the person you least expect is exactly the person you need most. That's my story. That's my final revelation. The daughter they said would never measure up became the soldier who saved them all.